Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you guys a tour of my front garden here and also my sunflower plants. I'll also have a tour of my back garden with the tropical plants, but I'm going to leave that for another video because otherwise it's going to be one very long video. So this is the front garden anyway, a south-facing garden, and this is the one I keep more traditional, with just a couple of aspects to kind of hint the tropical appearance at the back, with a couple of Ensete bananas at the side here and also the Cordyline as well. So this here is a hedge I've not really shown much in previous videos, apart from a video I made about variegation reversion. This is going to be a topiary feature on my hedge. I'm going to trim that into the shape of the number for the house. So this is the front garden anyway. It's coming along quite nicely now. It's middle to late September now. There is a storm coming tonight, so I want to get this filmed now because some of these sunflowers and other flowers might be broken by tomorrow morning. So this is the front garden, as I say. We've got the laburnums either side of the entrance to the garden here. I'm going to train them into an archway at some point, but they're coming on quite nice. So most of this garden is just a traditional rose bed setup with bedding plants. And this time of year it tends to look its best, although this year we had a problem with the summer bedding, so I planted this out with lots of African marigolds. You can see some here. Now last year I did the same and they did really well. This year they really struggled. It was too dry in June, so they never really got their roots established. We then had a very wet July and the slugs and snails really started to damage them. You can see quite a lot of them down here have lost all their leaves from the slugs and snails. So that really set them back and caused a lot of issues. And then they didn't really take off again in August when it was warmer, and they've just kind of petered out. And there's only one or two of them left now. So I've gone ahead and replaced them with the autumn bedding, which is these pansies down the side. I've also left a few pansies that I've self-seeded, so that's why there's a mixture. The ones I've planted are these ones over here, which are kind of like the larger purple and white ones, but there's also some small violas and other ones like the yellow ones over there and white ones, which are just kind of self-seeded, and I just let them grow up. So when it comes to the main plants in the bed, the main things are the roses, but this year they've done really bad, so I won't talk too much about them. You can see last year's video if you want to see a lot more about the roses. But basically with the dry start to the summer, that really stressed them out. And then we had the damp conditions in July, and that was perfect for black spot to occur. All these roses I've got are really resistant to fungal diseases, and they don't normally get any kind of black spot or any kind of fungal diseases, but this year was particularly bad, so a lot of them have lost all their leaves already now, and there's only one or two in flower at the moment, where normally at this time of year I'd expect to have several still in flower. So the roses haven't done so well, so as I say, there's only one or two in flower at the moment, but what has done really well this year are the dahlias. So this one here has done the best. They're all the same variety, they're all Café au lait. This one was actually planted on the root system of an older plant. So last year I had a very large dahlia, and every year I've been putting them inside and keeping the roots stored. But year after year the root system's been getting bigger and bigger, and last winter it was just too big to store, so it was about the size of a beach ball probably, the root system. So what I had to do is leave it in the ground. I mulched it heavily hoping it would survive the winter, but we had a particularly long hard cold snap and that killed it off, so the roots just rotted away. I planted this on top of the rotting roots, and that's given it a lot of extra feed, and also there's been a lot of moisture retention with the old rotting tuber, and this one has done particularly well. So this is kind of in between flowering at the moment. You can see there's loads of buds coming. It did have a really good display earlier, and it had some really nice large flowers, and I'll show you some photos of how they looked. But it's interesting, this variety is Café au lait, which has very large flowers, but they do vary in colour. So you can see we've got some other ones down here, the same variety, and one over here. It's much more of a kind of light pink or a cream colour, whereas these ones here are that really dark bright pink. And I've got another one over here which is doing particularly well. You can see again it's more of a creamy pink colour, so they do vary quite a bit, but they've done very well this year. Now the rest of the bed, as I say, hasn't done so well with the bedding and the roses. I have got one or two other plants. There's another dahlia down here, but it's just finished flowering now. And I also tried a grafted dahlia, so this root system here is a tree dahlia. On top of it is Café au lait, and that hasn't really done particularly well this year. It hasn't flowered, so I'll try again next year. I have done this once before and it had flowered quite well. I'll definitely be trying that more often with the grafting technique, see if I can come up with any interesting growth forms. So the rest of the garden here, we've got my Ensete ventricosum. Now the Ensete ventricosums have done really bad this year. They're a lot smaller than last year. The reason being is the trunks were so large, I struggled to store them, and I stored them a bit later than I should have, so they got a bit of frost damage. Then my conservatory was colder than I should have had it, so normally I like to keep these around 5 or 10 degrees, but we had several days where the temperature in the conservatory was below 5 degrees. With the European gas prices, I didn't want to really spend lots of money heating my conservatory, so it really suffered. And then it was too big a plant for me to put in a pot, so I had to put it straight in the ground. So I didn't get the head start that I normally give it when I start it in a pot in the conservatory. So it was really set behind, and the one in the back actually had quite a lot of rot at the bottom. This one had a small amount as well. So they've just been a bit slow to get going, and that's why they're much smaller this year. I'll show you the photos from previous years and you can see they were much bigger. So it's a bit of a disappointment with them. With that being a victim of the cold weather, there's the Cordyline here. It's looking quite healthy at the moment, but it's kind of hiding the fact that it's severely damaged. So the growing point almost died off. All the new leaves fell off and died. You can see some of the old leaves here that were damaged. And then the new growth has come through nice and strong. So I was worried I was going to lose the growing tip, but luckily it haven't. What I have lost though is the outer section of stem down the bottom. So this grows quite differently to a normal tree. This grows more like a palm tree, but this does have secondary thickening. So what happens with this is, unlike a normal tree where you would have all the sap going around the outside of the stem, the sap actually goes up in the middle of the stem through a core, and that core is that intact bit in the middle. But around the outside you have bark cells, and they kind of thicken the trunk over time and make sure that it gets thicker so it can support more growth as time goes by. But what's happened here is we had some severe frost, and it was prolonged frost, and it was without snow, so there's no insulation at the base of the plant. And what that has caused is all the bottom section to rot off. So the outer section has died, the inner section stayed alive. So there's still sap flow, and that's why it's still growing quite well, but it can't thicken itself up anymore. So you can see above that it's nice and thick, and it's continuing to thicken up its stem, but that section there isn't thickening anymore. And if I wobble it, you'll see it does actually flex at that point there. So there is a risk that this will just snap off this winter. So what's happening now is, because it knows it's damaged, it's sending up all these side shoots. I've been snapping most of them off. I just want 1 or 2 strong ones to grow, and then I'll just pick one as a replacement. And when this finally snaps off, I'll have a new shoot that will come up and replace it. But for now, I'm just going to leave it. Because there's plenty of leaf on the top, it's building up its root system, and the bigger the root system gets, the faster that new shoot will come up when the main stem breaks off. So it's a bit of a disappointment with this. Hopefully I can get another year out of it, but I think probably one winter storm this winter will probably snap it off. But at least it will come back from the roots, and it's not a complete loss. So when it comes to the rest of the front garden, it's really the sunflowers that take the show. So most of the sunflowers that I have are my own variety. This one here is a very tall one. I'll put the name of the variety on the screen now. This is a tall single flower. It was actually higher than the guttering, but the weight of the flower heads brought it down. It's a particularly large one of the tallest varieties you can grow, and it's got really large heads. You can see I'm 6'5", so I'm not very good for scale, but really big flower heads there. That was a nice display when that was in flower. But the rest of my sunflowers are the multi-branching variety. You can see we've got this giant one here, and then I've just got a few others dotted around. And I'll also show you the ones in the back. There's quite a few sunflowers there. So this is my biggest plant this year. What I do is I plant them around the garden. This particular spot, I really enrich the soil, and I give extra care and attention to this plant. And the plant that I always grow in this position always grows the largest. But what I do is I try and pick the seeds from the one that's done the best every year. This year it's a bit harder to tell which has done the best, because this one is the largest, but then that's because it's got the best soil conditions. So I need to try and assess the ones in the poorer soil conditions and figure out which one is the best to take seed from. And what I'm going for is, every year I'm picking the seeds from the plant that has the most flowers, the least amount of broken stems, and the longest flowering period. And so eventually what I'm hoping for is to get a bigger and bigger plant with more and more flowers, and eventually come up with a sunflower that looks like a tree. This one's quite close. I think this is over 3 meters now, and it's going to have over 100 flowers in its flowering season. What happens is you get one flower right at the top. You can maybe see where the stem was cut just below the bamboo cane in the top there. Then all these side branches have flowers, which is happening on these lower sections, so they're also quite large flowers. Each side branch has its own flower, and each side branch is in fact about as large as a normal 6 foot or 7 foot sunflower. So you can see here quite a long stem, and that's about the size of a normal sunflower. Then each side branch then sends out its own little side branches, and then that's what the ones at the top are doing at the moment, and you can see that's why you got all these little flowers. So what's going to happen over time is these larger flowers down the bottom will disappear, and then the whole plant will be covered in small flowers like the top is right now. It will basically start from the top and spread down. The whole thing will be covered in sunflowers soon. But as I say, there's a bad storm coming, and although I've tied this up really well, there could be 50-60 mile an hour wind gusts, and a plant this big is hard to keep upright and stable. So hopefully it will survive. If it does, I'll put up some photos and show you how that did. So I've got several sunflowers to say. Here's another small one which is towards the end phase where it has lots of small flowers and has that really nice display, as you can see there. I'll just quickly show you the ones in the back garden, and then we'll come back to the front garden and finish the front garden tour. So these are the sunflowers in the back garden. Now the soil that they're in is really bad. I haven't enriched it at all. It's a really sandy, stony soil, very little feed, very compacted as well, because I was compacting the soil all around here when I was building the shed at the back there. So these aren't as big, but that's because of the growing conditions. So I need to think about which one to collect the seed from. There's one here which I particularly like. It had very large leaves. You can see some of these have quite small leaves. So this one had very large leaves. It also has nice short internodes, so it's a bit stockier for the wind damage, but it's actually the tallest as well. So it's got more leaves and more height despite having the shorter internodes. And with the shorter internodes, it's got a denser flowering arrangement. So you can see up here, per foot of stem, we've probably got quite a few more flowers coming out from the side there. So this one is going to look really nice. Also, the flowers are a good size with long petals. See, the petals are nice and long there. And so I've left the original head here so that I can collect the seeds and probably use that one as the one to continue with my breeding. So I think this one, although it's smaller than the one at the front, I think it has more potential. Also, I'm wanting one that has a bit more of a clear stem at the bottom. The reason being, the side branches that come off at the bottom, they tend to snap quite easily and they're hard to support. Whereas this one, as you can see, I haven't actually put any supports on its side branches, and they're all holding really well, so that's really good. The one at the front, I have to tie every single branch up individually, and I'm looking to breed that out of them. All the ones I've had previously, I've had to tie up the branches individually. It's a lot of work. I'm trying to breed in some stronger branches, and this one has that nice form. It also has more of that tree appearance with a clear stem up to about 1 meter in height, and then branching above that, which is exactly what I'm looking for, instead of the one at the front, which is branching all the way from the base. Although I may collect some seeds from the one at the front, and I may try and grow a second strain if I have the space to grow the extra sunflowers. So that's the sunflowers. I'm really happy with how they've done this year. We haven't had too much wind this summer, and so they've done particularly well. And although we had some quite bad drought, they have still grown quite well despite the dry conditions. So I'm really happy with how they've done. But I'll show you the rest of the front garden now. So what I have around this bed is lots of lilies. I'll show you some photos of how they looked. They normally flower July, August, so they're finished now. And around them, I've also got lots of gladioli that come up as well. And they look nice throughout the summer. They have quite a staggered flowering, although normally gladioli all flower at the same time. You see there's a couple at the back there just still in flower, a purple one and a white one. They look really nice throughout the summertime, and although I wouldn't normally think them as hardy in Scotland, I did plant them really deep, and they've come through some really hard freezes of -15 and even prolonged freezes that lasted a few weeks, and they've not had any problems. So I'm quite happy that they've actually been quite hardy. So I've also got some other bedding plants here. Now they're not looking at their best as it's the end of the season. The reason I do this update at this time of year is because my tropical plants take so long to get to their full size. So you can see here, these are starting to go, but they're still looking quite nice. These are tuberous begonias. This one has lost a lot of branches from the wind and the rain. The other ones are looking a bit bedraggled, but they haven't lost as many branches, but they were looking quite good for most of the summer. And then in the front, I've also got a couple of tropical plants. I've got my Ensete ventricosums here. This one is the Maurelii variety with the nice red leaves, and then I've got a nice big one here as well. So they've done really well this year. They started as quite small plants, but they've really sized up nicely. So in the front garden, I've also got my bulb border here. So this bulb border has got a real good variety of bulbs. I've got 3 different types of bulbs, and they all appear at different times of year, so they don't compete with each other. So at the moment, the Nerine Bowdenii is the one that's in growth. You can see lots of green strappy leaves. Unfortunately, only 2 of them have started flowering. I think they still need a bit more time to mature. But the idea is this will be completely covered in hundreds of pink flowers in the autumn time. Then in late autumn, November, December time, my saffron flowers come up, my saffron crocuses, and they cover up the edges. And then in springtime, I have my giant alliums, and they look really stunning. So it's a bulb border, but it has flowers throughout the year, and so there's always something of interest, and because they all come up at different times, they don't compete with each other, and so this bed is really full with lots of different bulbs. So the only other plants to show you really are around the side here. We have a fuchsia. This one I normally train on espalier along the bamboo canes. I haven't been able to do it as much this year because it had really bad frost damage, so it set it back and it lost a lot of its younger branches. And the other problem it had was it had vine weevil larvae eating off the roots, so it really struggled at the beginning of the year and is only really just taken off now. So hopefully this will do a bit better next year. But this year, although it's looking quite good now, it was looking really poorly for most of the summer. So that's all for this tour of my front garden and my sunflowers. I'll see you in another video soon where I'll be giving you a tour of the back garden and all its tropical plants.